May I, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Ma'am, I think where I left off, I was asking you about there were some certain items that came from the medical examiner's office that you processed, is that right?
I did.
And you indicated there were some fingernails, as well as some blood from Odin Lloyd. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, for sure.
May.
Just going to show you these three photographs, which have previously been marked 205, 206A, and 206B. Is that right?
Yes,
And you recognize these?
I do.
In 205, you recognize that as the blood sample?
I do.
And that, I think you described how you blotted it and then sent that out to DNA?
Correct.
And then the fingernail clippings as well, you swabbed
I did.
and then also sent out to DNA?
I did.
Now, do you recall at some point receiving items of some article of clothing, some pants or some sweat pants?
I did.
And do you recall when you received those items, ma'am?
I don't.
Do you recall what you did after you received them?
I examined them in the lab.
And just with regard to the jeans, do you recall whether you attempted to recover or did anything with regard to DNA swabbing?
I did.
And just describe how do you do that with an article of clothing such as jeans?
So in regards to clothing, we want to try and figure out who might have been wearing that item of clothing. So we take a swab of an area that is most likely touching the skin. So in this case, in a pair of jeans, I swabbed the rear of the interior waistband and prepared that for DNA testing.
And did you have another article of clothing, what was described as Puma sweatpants?
I did.
And did you do the same thing?
I did.
I could just approach one. Just going to show you a series of photographs here. If you look at those. You recognize those photos?
I do.
And just for the purpose of the record, they've been previously marked 209A, B, and C, and 210 A, B, and C. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. And that's 209A now on the overhead. Those are the jeans that you examined?
Yes, this is a photo that was generated during my exam of the jeans.
209B
A second photo during my exam,
and 209C.
and a third photo during my exam.
You indicated you were able to take a DNA swab to that article of clothing?
I did.
And where did you do that?
The interior waistband on the back side.
That would be up in this area here.
Correct.
And then with regard to 209, let's strike that 210A, recognize this article of clothing.
A photo generated when I examined the sweatpants.
210B,
A second photo of the sweatpants.
and then lastly 210C.
And a third photo of the sweatpants.
And you indicated you did a similar swabbing inside of that waistband.
Yes, the interior waistband.
Now, ma'am, on February 6th of 2014, did you have an occasion to have contact with Aaron Hernandez?
I did not.
Okay. Do you recall at some point in February 2014, having contact with Aaron Hernandez?
Yes,
Okay, and what date was that?
February 7th.
7th. On that date, what was your purpose in meeting with him?
So on February 6th, I was requested to go take a buccal standard, a DNA standard from Mr. Hernandez.
Okay, and just tell us, what is a buccal standard?
So it's a standard that's taken for the purposes of generating a DNA profile. It's a simple test. We use a swab where we rub the interior of the cheek under the tongue and then apply that sample to a card.
Okay. And did you do that with regards to Mr. Aaron Hernandez?
I did.
And as a result of that, did you take a DNA swab from him?
I did on the 7th.
And do you see Aaron Hernandez in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you just point him out and describe what he's wearing?
He is wearing a dark black jacket, looks to be a tan tie, and a white shirt.
Your Honor, if the record can reflect the witness identifying the defendant. And what did you do with that DNA swab?
I returned it to the lab, checked it into evidence, and then it was transported to our DNA unit.
Okay. Ma'am, were you involved at all in any items of soil that had been submitted in the investigation of this matter?
I was.
Okay, and just tell us, what involvement did you have with regard to soil?
So there was some soil samples that were submitted to evidence. I aided in the packaging of those samples to be sent down to another laboratory.
Okay, what laboratory was that?
The FBI laboratory?
And did you have contact with an individual down there?
I did.
And who was that person?
Miss Jody Webb?
Now, at some point after those items were submitted, were they later returned?
They were.
Now, in the course of your involvement in this case, did you inspect any other articles of clothing?
I did.
And what other articles of clothing did you inspect?
I examined some clothing from Odin Lloyd.
Okay. And what was the first article of clothing that you inspected?
A blue sweatshirt.
And just tell us about your inspection of that. What observations did you make of the blue sweatshirt?
So I first retrieved the sweatshirt from our evidence unit. I photographed it. I noted any trace material, any holes, and any staining.
Okay. And what was the general condition of the blue sweatshirt when you examined it?
It was dirty with a large amount of granular debris on it.
Did you notice anything else on the sweatshirt at that time?
There was red-brown staining on the front and back and several holes.
Approach him. Ma'am, I'm just going to show you these two photographs. Ask if you recognize them.
I do.
And what do you recognize them to be?
Those were photographs generated during my exam of the sweatshirt.
Who took these photographs?
I did.
And does this fairly portray the condition of the sweatshirt front and back when you took those photographs?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd offer this as the next exhibit.
No object.
Next exhibit. Thank you. Apologies, Your Honor. And I'm placing what's now marked 268A on the overhead. Do you recognize that as the sweatshirt of Odin Lloyd?
I do.
And you described certain observations you made of the sweatshirt. This 268A showing the front portion of that.
It is.
Just describe its general condition.
The front side was pretty much clean of debris, and there were 3 holes visible.
And I guess as a preliminary matter, this sweatshirt, what type of sweatshirt was it?
It was a cotton blue sweatshirt that was labeled Old Navy.
Okay. Pullover zippered?
Front zipper all the way to the bottom.
Now, did you make a closer inspection of certain areas of this, this article of clothing?
I did.
And just tell us what you observed.
So I took close-up photos of areas that had visible holes. I microscopically examined those holes, and then I performed chemical testing on those holes.
Now, when you refer to holes, just looking at the front of this photograph of the front, how many holes did you observe in the front?
I observed 3 holes, and I marked them with a square white sticker that had an arrow.
Okay. I'm just going to start at the bottom, the lower portion here. First of all, is this some form of tag that was on the garment?
That was a tag that was on prior to my exam.
Now, this item here, do you recognize what that is?
I do.
And what is that?
That is a hole that I marked as hole number 1.
And just describe, where is that hole on that garment?
It is on the front left side of the sweatshirt near the pocket.
And when you say left side, which left looking at it or left if you were wearing it?
Left as if you were wearing it.
So that would be on this side over here?
Correct.
Now, can you see the hole in this photograph?
I can.
I'm sorry?
I can.
Okay, and just, if you would, just point to that. Am I accurately pointing to that location?
You are.
And you indicated there were how many holes in the front of this sweatshirt?
3.
Where was the, where were the other ones?
There were 2 additional holes on the hood.
Is that shown in this photograph?
It is.
And just direct my attention to where that would be located.
To the top hood area where there are 2 white stickers with arrows.
Okay. Just pointing to the lower tag. Who put this tag there?
I did.
And was there a number on it?
There was.
And what number was assigned?
I believe it was number 2.
And is that, there's an arrow on that tag?
There is.
And what is that arrow pointing to?
It's pointing to a second hole.
When you say a second hole, where is that located?
I believe it's to the right of the tag.
And I'm just pointing in this area here?
Correct.
In that area?
Yes.
Now, just above, there's another tag,
Correct.
and what does that represent?
I believe it represents hole number 3.
And did you assign that number 3?
I did.
And just, if you'd indicate that arrow, is that pointing in the direction, hole number 3?
It is.
And you would just point to that area? In this area over here?
Correct.
Just describe this area of the sweatshirt. What part, these hole 2 and 3, what part of the sweatshirt were those holes located in?
They are on the top side of the hood.
When you say the top side of the hood, just if you could describe that or show us and demonstrate where that would be in the hood.
So if you had the hood up, they would be on the front side, top of the hood.
And if the hood were down, where would that location be?
On the back side, laying against the person's back.
Just going to put 268B on the overhead. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
And what is that?
A photo that was generated during my exam.
And does this represent the condition of it when you examined it?
It does.
Can you just describe its general condition?
It was red-brown saturating stains in the back and granular debris present.
And these areas, when you say saturation stains, just show us those areas.
Areas in the center and up near the hood.
Right there. And again, starting at the bottom, there's certain tags on this on the sweatshirt of Odin Lloyd.
There is.
Put those there.
I did.
Okay, and are they numbered?
The holes are numbered.
I'm sorry?
The holes are numbered.
With regard to starting, is it easier to start on the right side here or the bottom?
The center of the shirt.
Center. Okay, directing your attention right here, was there a number assigned to this tag?
There was.
And what number is that?
Number 4.
And there's an arrow there, what is that pointing to?
It's pointing to the hole in the sweatshirt.
Is that in this area here?
Correct.
Is that in that area of saturated blood?
There is some, yes.
And that's number 4, is there a number 5?
Yes, above it.
Am I pointing at number 5?
You are.
And is that pointing to a particular direction?
To the hole.
And is that to the right of that tag?
It is.
Is that area there?
Yes.
Is that also in an area of what you described as saturation?
It is.
Is there a number 6?
Yes.
Where is that?
Above number 5?
Is that reflected by this tag?
It is.
Is that arrow pointing in the direction of another hole?
It is.
Is this area here number 6?
It is.
Is there a number 7?
There is.
And where is that located?
Above number 6?
Am I pointing to this correctly?
Yes.
And is that pointing to an area where you observed a hole in the sweatshirt of Odin Lloyd?
It is.
And where is that in reference to the tag?
It's pointing towards the hole on the right.
That's that right there?
Correct.
Is that also in an area of saturation noted on the back of the garment?
Yes.
Is there a number 8?
Yes.
Where is that?
Above number 7?
Is that now in the center of the screen?
It is.
That tag, does that also point to another a hole in this sweatshirt?
It does.
Is that in this area?
Yes.
Just to reorient you, were there 2 additional holes?
Yes.
And where were they located?
On the right sleeve?
And do you recall how you numbered them? Call number 9.
Number 9 would be on the interior.
Okay, is that reflected in this area?
It is.
And that arrow is pointing in which direction?
It's pointing down.
And in that area, is there a hole?
There is.
Is that in an area where there appears to be a reddish-brown stain on the blue sweatshirt?
Yes.
And was there an additional hole?
Number 10.
And is that shown on where my pen is pointing?
It is.
And is there an arrow pointing to the direction or the location of that hole,
Yes, it's pointing down.
down in this area?
Correct.
Is that similarly in an area of reddish-brown stain?
Yes.
So in total, how many holes were there to this sweatshirt?
There were 11 holes.
Where is the 11th hole?
The 11th hole is on the interior of the hood opposite hole number 8.
And number 8 was, is that located in the top of these tags?
It is.
And just, you're indicating it's on the inside,
Correct.
so is it observable, can you see it in this photo?
Cannot.
Where is it in location, in reference point to number 8? How
It's-
close is it, if you know?
It's opposite the hole that's present for number 8.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I have brought in a mannequin for the use of the garment with the mannequin, to just drape it on the mannequin.
Your Honor, this is the first I've heard about this for some reason. I guess
Objection, are you?
I have an objection to it.
Objection sustained.
Ma'am, just in terms of, Your Honor, with the court's permission, then I'd ask the witness to be allowed to step out of the jury box and be able to show the item to the jury. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you, if you would, to step down. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like her to be able to show Exhibit 194. And if I could just have you, yes, hold that up. And if you could, starting at the front, if you would show the areas that we just covered, depict the holes in the front of that.
Hole number 1 is on the left side of the sweatshirt in the pocket area.
Okay, that's hole number 1. What about hole number 2?
Hole number 2 is up on the top side of the hood.
Okay, hole number 3.
Hole number 3 is also up on the top side of the hood.
For the jury.
Hole number 4.
Hole number 4 is in the center back of the sweatshirt.
And hole number 5.
On the top side of the back of the sweatshirt.
Hole number 6, please.
On the top above hole number 5.
Hole number 7.
Hole number 7 is above number 6 on the back side seam.
Hole number 8.
Number 8 is on the back side of the hood in the center.
Hole number 9.
Hole number 9 is on the interior of the right sleeve.
Hole number 10, please.
Hole number 10 is on the exterior of the right sleeve.
And if you could show us hole number 11.
Hole number 11 is opposite hole number 8 in the center of the interior hood.
Now, if you would, if you just turn that the sweatshirt around. And there's a piece of material that's missing in the back. Is that right?
There is.
Was that missing at the time that you inspected it?
It was not.
I think you indicated some point after examining this item, was it sent somewhere else?
It was.
And where was it sent to?
To our tracing it.
Thank you. Excuse me. Ma'am, was there other articles of clothing that you inspected that was collected from the body of Odin Lloyd?
There was.
And do you recall inspecting a shirt?
I do.
And just generally describe that shirt. What color was it?
It was a red plaid short sleeve button-up shirt.
Your Honor, may I approach? Just going to show you these two photographs. Ask you if you recognize them.
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Those were photos generated during my exam of this shirt.
Your Honor, do they appear to be in the same condition as when you took the photographs during the course of your examination?
They are.
Your Honor, I'd offer these to the next exhibit.
No objection.
You mark this next exhibit.
The 69 AM.
Thank you. If I could publish this. And I'm placing number 269A on the overhead. That photograph of the shirt that you took.
Yes.
Did you notice any damage to the shirt?
I did.
Could you just describe that?
There were several holes noted in the front side of the shirt.
And beginning down in the left side of this photograph, did you place a marker there for damage you noted?
I did.
And just, did you assign a number?
I did.
What number is that?
Number 1?
Now, in terms of your numbering, was that different than the numbering in terms of the corresponding holes with regard to the sweatshirt?
It is different.
So number 1, is there an arrow there pointing the direction of the damage you observed?
There is.
Where is that located?
On the right side of the shirt.
In this area?
Correct.
And did you know whether there was any other marking or discoloration of the shirt in this area?
There was.
And what is that?
Red-brown saturating stains.
Did you mark a location number 2 on this?
I did.
And where is that?
That would be the right front pocket area.
And the right, again, for the wear of the shirt.
Correct.
That be in this location here.
To your right, yes.
And does that also point to damage, excuse me, you observed?
It does.
And is that this area in here?
It is.
Did you notice any red-brown stain in that area?
I did not.
Did you place a tag for damage you noted somewhere else on the garment?
On the left side pocket was number 3.
Okay. And is that this area of this tag here?
Yes.
And does that show the arrow, excuse me, pointing to damage that you noted?
It is.
And where is that?
To the right of the number 3 arrow.
Is that right in this area? I'm sorry, is that, right here?
Correct.
And did you notice whether there was red-brown stain in that area?
There was.
Did you find the number, or did you locate and place a tag for number 4?
I did.
And where is that located?
Up on the right-hand side near the collar?
Is that in this area here, ma'am?
It is.
And what damage did you note in that area?
There was a hole.
Is that in the direction of the arrow to the right there?
It is.
Did you notice any red-brown stain in that area?
I did not.
Did you also mark a location number 5?
I did.
And where is that?
It's on the right-hand side near the collar.
Is that in this area here, ma'am?
It is.
And that arrow is pointing what direction?
Up?
Up in here.
Yes,
And was there damage that you noted in that location?
there is.
And just describe that damage.
There's a hole?
And did you note any red-brown stain in that area?
I did.
In total, how many holes did you note in the front of this red plaid shirt of Odin Lloyd?
5 in total.
You conduct a similar, 269Bs now on the overhead. Did you conduct a similar examination of the back of that red plaid shirt?
I did.
Does this photograph show that area?
It does.
Did you mark as well holes or damage to the back of the red plaid shirt?
I did.
Beginning at the bottom here, is that one of the areas you noted?
It is.
And did you number that?
I did.
What number is that?
Number 6?
And that arrow from number 6 is pointing in which direction?
It's pointing to the right?
In this area here?
Correct.
Was there, just describe the damage you observed in that area.
There was a hole?
And in terms of the, is there discoloration on the plaid shirt?
Yes, red-brown staining.
Just moving up, did you locate and mark a hole number 7?
I did.
Is that located here?
It is.
And the damage that you noted was where?
To the right of the arrow?
And just describe that area.
Right there.
And was that also a hole?
It was.
And what about red-brown staining in that area? Was there any?
Yes, saturating red-brown stains.
When you say saturating, is that something more than your observations of red-brown stain?
It's just a larger amount of red-brown staining that soaks through the fabric.
Now, above number 7, did you mark an additional location?
I did.
And what was that?
The next one up is number 8.
And was there a hole in that area?
There is.
Is that in this area to the right of the tag?
Correct.
And just describe the saturation there.
There was.
And then was there an additional hole that you noted?
There was.
And what number did you assign that?
Number 9.
Is that reflected here?
It is.
And the area, is that to also a hole in the, or to the right of that tag?
It is.
Again, is that in that saturated area?
Correct.
Just down here, ma'am, just directing your attention to where I'm placing my pen. Is that an area of saturation?
It is.
Did you note any damage to the red plaid shirt in this area?
There was no damage.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to have the witness step down again and show the jurors what's previously been marked 196.
Your Honor, I object to going through this again. Respectfully, I really don't think it's a good use of the jury's time to do this twice. I object.
This is the different objections of rule.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, is that the red plaid shirt that you examined?
It is.
And if you could, if we could start in the front, if you would just detail where you observed those holes?
The first hole was on the right-hand side, in this area.
Okay. And that was marked as number 1?
Correct.
Okay, where is hole number 2, please?
Hole number 2 is on the right-hand side in the pocket area.
Okay, and was that the hole that you indicated there was not red-brown stain on?
Correct.
Okay. How about hole number 3?
Hole number 3 was on the left-hand side in the pocket area.
Okay. And hole number 4?
Was up in the collar area on the right-hand side.
Okay, and I think you indicated there was 5 in the front, and where was the 5th?
The 5th was right next to hole number 4 on the front right-hand side.
Okay. Now, if you would, please just reverse the shirt. And if we could start with the hole you described as number 6, where is that located?
In the center of the shirt, near the red-brown stain.
Okay, and number 7?
Above number 6,
And number 8? I'm sorry, what did I say, 7?
number 7 is above hole number 6,
And number 8?
is above hole number 7.
And number 9?
Is number 9.
Okay. And ma'am, was there also a similar cutting from this garment?
There is.
Okay, and was that was not there when you first examined this item, is that true?
It's not here.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Now, ma'am, after you identified the holes in the sweatshirt and this red plaid shirt, did you do anything else
I
to
did.
these items? Okay. What else did you do?
I first began by microscopically examining the holes.
Okay, and just describe what was the purpose of microscopically examining the holes?
We like to identify certain characteristics of the holes and any debris that might be around them, and we use the aid of a microscope to see closer to the holes.
Okay. And are you able to make determinations of the fabrics by looking at the microscope?
The fibers of the fabrics, yes.
Now, did you do any testing on either of these items, the blue sweatshirt or the red plaid?
I did. I did chemical testing on most of the holes in both the sweatshirt and the shirt.
Okay. Now, before, at some point, did you do any testing for a screening test for the presence of human blood?
I did.
And what were the results of that?
Positive.
Okay. After you did that, did you do other chemical tests on the shirt?
I did.
And what kind of chemical tests did you do?
I was doing chemical testing for the presence of gunshot residue.
Okay. And just, again, you've described using stubs to do that?
No,
Okay. Is this a different process?
it is.
And just describe what process is this?
So there are several tests that we do to look for gunshot residues. We do a test that looks for the burnt particles produced when a firearm is fired. I also looked for lead and copper residues around the holes.
Okay. Now, the testing you had described earlier, the gunshot powder residue test, when a gun is fired, certain particles are emitted from the primers, the burning of the primers.
There are.
And is that, you had tested at one point a sweatshirt, you said around the cuffs,
I did.
and describe why you would test in that area.
The primers usually are deposited on the hand area and sleeve when a firearm is fired, so we do the stubbing to collect any primer residues that might be present.
So that test would be an attempt to recover primers or materials related to the discharge of the firearm, the firing itself.
Correct.
Okay. This test that you're now describing, is that for the other end, where the barrel actually, where the bullet comes out of the barrel?
Yes.
Okay. And what type of, in the process of a gun being fired, what types of materials will come out of the barrel of a gun?
burnt and unburnt particles of gunpowder, as well as the projectile and whatever the components of the projectile are.
Okay. And the test that, is there a test to attempt to determine whether a gun was fired based on elements that you can find on clothing, say?
We're looking for the residues of that are emitted from the end of the barrel of a gun, as well as the passage of a projectile into the garment.
Okay. And is there a name for this test?
The burnt particles we are looking for are a test we use called the Grice test.
Okay. And just describe the Grice test. What actually does that look for?
So it looks for the burnt particles of gunpowder.
And how do you go about doing the Grice test?
It's a chemical test that we do. It takes a specially treated photographic paper that we apply chemicals to. We then apply it to the area around the hole, and if there are burnt particles, it will react with the chemicals when you apply heat, and they will stay on the photographic paper.
And is there a purpose for which you would do a Grice test?
Yes.
And what is that purpose?
We can determine distance that the firearm was fired from by the pattern that is seen in the Grice test.
Okay. When you say the distance, is there a range that you can use this test to determine how far away a person was when a gun was fired at them?
There are.
Okay. And what is that range?
Generally, the burnt particles, burnt and unburnt particles will travel 4 to 5 feet. The vaporous lead that comes out of the end of a firearm will travel approximately 3 feet.
Okay. And so with regard to the Grice test and the vaporous lead, are there additional tests that you can do specifically related to holes or bullet holes?
Yes.
And just describe what are those tests?
So there are 2 chemical tests that we can do to determine the component of the actual, what the bullet is made of. So we do a lead and copper test around the hole.
Okay. And just describe how would lead or copper be deposited around a hole?
As the projectile travels through the fabric, it will leave components of the projectile onto the fabric.
Okay. So with regard to the Grice test, the vaporous lead test, and the determination of lead and or copper, did you test all of these holes?
Most of them.
Okay. And the holes that you were able to test, were there some holes in terms of the, beginning with the front of the garments, the sweatshirt and the red plaid? Were you able to test holes in the front?
I was.
And what holes did you test?
I tested all the front holes on both the sweatshirt and the plaid shirt.
Okay. Excuse me. Now, just beginning,
Just going to put 268A back on the overhead.
just beginning with the sweatshirt, did you conduct any testing of holes on the front of this?
I did.
And which holes did you test?
Number 1, number 2, and number 3.
So number 1, is that better for focus?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Number 1, number 2, number 3.
Correct.
And just tell us, starting with number 1, what test did you perform on that?
I performed the Grice test, which is looking for the burnt particles, gunpowder particles. I also performed the lead and copper test.
Okay. So hole number 1, the Grice test you indicated would be indicative of a gun being fired within what distance?
4 to 5 feet.
What was your result when you did the test on hole number 1, Grice?
It was positive.
And just positive, can you describe what your findings were?
There were several reactions, orange staining on the Grice test that formed a pattern.
When you say it formed a pattern, just describe that pattern.
It was like a half circle. It measured approximately 4 inches.
Now, when you do the Grice test, and you arrive at some, you've indicated it's 4-inch half circle.
Correct.
Okay. Just tell us about that half circle. Did that have any significance to you?
We're looking for a pattern that is normally in the shape of a circle. And in this case, on hole number 1, there was only half of a circle on the left side of the sweatshirt.
And are you familiar with the term voiding?
I am.
And just could you describe to the jurors what is voiding?
Voiding is an area where there was no staining, no reaction.
And if another article of clothing or something was blocking it, would you then get a void on the garment itself?
Yes, you would expect the other half of the circle to be on whatever was in front of the void.
Okay. When you had received this sweatshirt, what condition was it in? Was it zippered up or zippered down or somewhere in between?
I believe it was zippered down.
Now, you indicated, in addition to the Grice test of hole number 1, you conducted a lead test.
I did.
And just tell us about your findings with regard to the lead test.
It was positive for vaporous lead, approximately 1/2 inch.
Okay. When you first of all, vaporous lead, what is that?
When the firearm is discharged, a cloud of smoke is released. That's the vaporous lead. It's very small particles that only travel about 3 feet, and we test for that deposit on the article of clothing.
And a positive finding would be indicative of what?
Within 3 feet.
Now, did you also conduct a copper test with regard to hole number 1?
I did.
And just tell us what your findings were.
Positive for copper.
And in terms of the copper, that copper finding, are you familiar with the term bullet wipe?
I am.
And if you just explain to the jurors, what is bullet wipe?
Bullet wipe is the wiping action when the bullet goes through the article of clothing. It's wiping off components that could be on that bullet or the component of the bullet itself.
And if there's a copper coated bullet, would that give a, is that the result that you'd find with a positive?
Correct.
Now, did you also test in the front of the blue sweatshirt at hole number 2?
I did.
Okay. Did you do a Grice test?
I did.
And what were the results?
Negative.
What about a lead test?
I did.
And what were the results?
Positive.
Okay. And just describe your finding.
Positive for a wiping of lead.
And would that be, when you say wiping, is that similar to, or the same thing as a bullet wipe?
Correct.
Casting of a bullet.
Yes.
And what about any copper result?
Positive for wiping.
Now, you also conduct similar testing at hole number 3.
I did.
And just tell us what, if any, Grice finding was there?
Negative for Grice.
And what about the lead results?
Negative for lead.
And what about copper?
Positive for copper.
So with regard to the front of this sweatshirt, the Grice finding, the only Grice finding was positive was at hole number 1.
Correct, on the left-hand side.
On the left-hand side, and again, left side being as left to the person wearing,
Correct.
so this side over here.
Yes.
In place 268B, you recognize this is the back of that sweatshirt.
I do.
Again, beginning with your numbering system at number 4 and about the center of the back. Did you conduct any chemical testing of that hole?
I did.
And just tell us, was there a Grice finding?
Grice was negative.
Okay, what about lead?
Was negative.
What about copper?
Positive.
Moving up to what you, excuse me, had marked hole number 5. Am I accurately pointing this out?
Correct.
Did you do a Grice test there?
I did.
And what were your findings?
Positive for a scattered pattern.
Okay, when you say scattered pattern, what do you mean by that?
Not a full circular pattern, just scattered reactions on the Grice test.
And would that be indicative of the distance a gun was fired to achieve a scatter pattern?
Correct. Within 4 to 5 feet.
And did you conduct a lead test on hole number 5?
I did.
And what was the result?
Negative.
And what about a copper test?
I did.
And the result?
Negative.
Going up now to hole number 6, did you conduct similar testing?
I did.
What, if any, result, Grice result did you have?
A scattered pattern.
Okay, so would that be indicative of what you just had responded to regarding hole number 5?
Correct.
Any lead result?
Negative.
Copper?
Negative.
Going up now to hole number 7, did you conduct a Grice test there?
I did.
And what was the result?
Positive for a scattered pattern.
And what about lead?
Negative.
And how about copper?
Positive.
And the top one being number 8, did you do the same thing?
I did.
What were the results of the Grice testing?
Negative.
About lead
Negative.
and copper.
Negative.
Now, were you able to, with regard to the holes that you observed in the number 8, 7, were you able to determine whether those were, how close they were to each other? Whether in an open, let me just back up a second here. This here shows the hood in an open condition, is that right?
Correct.
Now, their orientation, these two holes to each other, when the hood was actually, would be in a down position. Did you make observations of that?
I did.
And just describe what you observed.
When the hood is in the downward position, it covers hole 5, 6, and 7.
And so, 5, this being 5, 6, and 7.
Correct.
Okay. And then this hole here, where would that be located roughly? And that would be in the down position.
Somewhere probably around 5 or 6.
So down in here.
Correct.
Ma'am, did you also conduct similar testing on hole number 9?
I did.
And that is that interior hole on the right sleeve?
It is.
And what, if any, Grice findings did you find?
Positive for a scattered pattern.
And in terms of the scattered pattern, did that have a shape or size?
Measured approximately 5.5 inches.
And what about lead results for that hole?
Positive for vaporous lead, approximately 3-inch pattern.
Okay. And with regard to a positive on vaporous lead, what, if any, significance does that have?
Distance would be approximately 3 feet.
And what about any copper finding with regard to hole number 9?
Negative.
I'm moving over here to the, as it's laying down, the outside portion of the right sleeve, hole number 10. Did you conduct Grice testing on that?
I did.
And what, if any, findings did you make?
Positive for a 2.5-inch pattern.
And what about And again, that would be indicative of,
Within 4 to 5 feet.
and what about lead results for hole number 10?
Positive for wipe around the hole.
And what about copper results?
Negative.
And then the last one that you had earlier described, number 11, which we can't see, it's on the inside of the hood. Did you conduct similar testing?
I did.
What, if any, Grice findings did you make?
Negative for Grice.
Okay, what about lead results?
Positive white for lead.
And copper, any copper result?
Negative for copper.
Just going to put back on mark 269A, that being the red plaid shirt. Just beginning with how you oriented them, number 1. Did you conduct similar testing, rice, lead, and copper on the plaid shirt?
I did.
What, if any, findings did you make when you conducted Grice testing on hole number 1?
Negative for Grice.
What about lead result?
Negative for lead.
How about copper?
Negative for copper.
What if any effect would having an outer garment over an inner garment when conducting a Grice test?
You would expect the outer garment to be in contact with any of the deposits, and it would cover the hole underneath, and you would have no deposits on the hole underneath.
Would that apply to vaporous lead?
Correct.
And what about just the lead or copper wipes?
Usually, yes.
Now, going to hole number 2. Did you conduct Grice testing?
I did.
And what were your findings on hole number 2?
A positive scattered pattern, approximately 3 1/4 inches,
Which would have what significance?
was fired within 4 to 5 feet.
And was there any lead result?
There was
And what was that?
vaporous lead, approximately 1 1/2 inches, and a wipe of lead.
And again, the finding of positive or vaporous lead, what, if any, significance would that have?
Approximately 3 feet.
Gun being fired at approximately 3 feet?
Correct.
And any copper result as to hole number 2?
Negative.
Going over to now hole number 3 on the red plaid shirt, what, if any, Grice finding?
It was a positive 4-inch pattern.
And what about lead result?
Negative for lead.
And how about copper?
Negative for copper.
Hole number 4, conduct Grice test there,
Correct.
and your finding?
Negative for Grice.
Okay. Did you do it both interior and exterior?
I did. The collar was folded down, so I didn't know which was the front or back, so I did both the interior and the exterior.
And findings both negative?
Correct.
How about lead
Negative on both exterior and interior.
and copper?
Negative both exterior and interior.
Hole number 5, that being along this seam, is that right?
It's above the arrow.
Above the arrow, okay. And what, if any, Grice findings did you make there?
Negative on the exterior and interior.
You did it on both sides?
I did.
And what about lead result?
Negative on the exterior, positive wipe on the interior.
Okay. And what about copper?
Negative on the exterior and interior.
And was that all on the front? Was all the testing on the front?
Yes.
You place 269B on the overhead. That showed the back of that red plaid shirt.
It does.
Again, beginning at the bottom, that would be number 6. Is that right?
Yes.
And what, if any, did you test any of these areas for Grice, lead, or copper?
I did not.
And just explain why you did not.
I had the knowledge that the sweatshirt was worn over the plaid shirts, thus the sweatshirt would prohibit any Grice from being deposited on the shirt, so I did not test it.
I can have a moment on that. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hernandez.
Good afternoon.
Am I correct that you've been referring to some materials up there during your direct testimony?
I have.
Would you mind if I just took a look at what you have?
Sure.
Thank you.
Your Honor, that would be my entire case file.
Thank you. So I think as you just explained to Her Honor, that's basically your reports, your notes, and your other laboratory work papers in connection with this case.
It is my laboratory work, as well as anyone else that did criminalistics work in there. It's our entire case file.
Okay, so that notebook includes your work and the work of others in your laboratory?
It does.
Okay. Now, you work in the State Police Crime Lab,
I do.
and you've been there since you graduated from college.
Correct?
Okay. So you have a pretty good understanding of how it operates.
I do.
Okay. And am I correct, Ms. Hernandez, you're a civilian, right?
I am.
And are there two different units in the State Police Crime Lab, one for civilians and one for troopers and sergeants and those people?
There is.
Okay. And just what do you call the unit that is for troopers and sergeants and people who have positions in the state police?
We refer to it as the sworn-in side, the state police side.
Okay. So there's the sworn-in state police side, and then there's the civilian side.
The forensic scientists are the civilians.
Okay. So the forensic scientists are the civilians?
Yes.
Okay. And you're a forensic scientist?
I am.
Okay. And as a forensic scientist, am I correct that you do the testing that you are directed to do?
I do testing when I examine evidence in conjunction with what occurred. I'll focus my testing on that.
Well, I guess my question is, does someone tell you what items he or she wants you to test?
They can.
Okay. And does someone tell you what tests he or she would like you to perform on a particular item of evidence?
Sometimes they do.
Okay. And did that happen in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and in this case, who is it that told you which items of evidence to test?
In conjunction with speaking to investigators and attorneys, it was decided on what items would be tested.
Well, you said in conjunction with speaking to investigators, you're talking about people on the sworn state police people, right?
Sworn state police as well as local.
As well as who?
Local police.
Okay. So there were sworn state police people and local North Attleboro police people, right?
Correct.
Okay. And they were part of, you talked to them about which items of evidence to test, right?
Yes,
And you said attorneys, you're referring to the prosecution team, right?
correct.
Okay. And they talked to you about which items of evidence they wanted you to test, right?
They did.
Okay. And those same people, that is, the state police, the North Attleboro police, and the prosecution team talked to you about what tests they wanted you to perform on particular items of evidence, right?
They talked about the evidence to be tested, and in conversation, I told them what tests we could do on those pieces of evidence, and it was decided what would be done.
Okay, so you told them what was possible, and they told you what they wanted to see done.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you told us that your involvement in this case started with a request for, I think, what you called a rush analysis, right?
Correct.
Okay. Who made a request for a rush analysis?
Investigation.
Okay. Do you remember who specifically investigation? Is that a person, or what is that?
I don't remember if it was a particular trooper or the district attorney's office. I don't recall.
Okay. So again, talking about the same people with input, state police, North Attleboro police, and the prosecutors, somebody, you're not sure who, asked you to do a rush analysis.
Yes.
Okay. And was that like a special kind of request?
It is.
Okay. And when you get a special request like that for a rush analysis, is it fair to say that part of your job as a forensic scientist is to try to comply with that request?
It is.
Okay. Now, one of the things you were asked to do, you told us about in direct examination, is you were asked to swab 5 discharged shell casings for DNA, right?
I was requested to examine them.
Okay. And were you specifically requested to swab them for DNA?
I don't know if they specifically requested it, but according to our protocols, that's one of the procedures that we do with the casings.
Okay. So as part of your examination, you would do that in the ordinary course?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you told us that you swabbed all 5 casings with one swab, right?
Correct.
Okay. And just tell us why, as a forensic scientist, you would choose to do it that way.
What we're looking for is such a small amount of DNA, and to provide the best sample in order to get a DNA profile, we combined, in this case, all 5 casings swabbed together in order to try and generate the best profile.
Okay. So basically you took a single, and is that a wet swab or a dry swab?
It's a dry swab that I applied distilled water to.
Okay. So it started out dry and you made it wet.
Correct.
All right. And once you had wetted, you then applied it to each and every one of those 5 swabs, right?
Rubbed it onto the discharge cartridge casings.
Okay. Each and every one of those cartridge casings, I'm sorry. Okay. And then you packaged it up.
I did.
Okay. Now, your lab has all kinds of paperwork that is required to accompany evidence, right?
It does.
Okay. And that's because it's important to document everything, right?
It is.
Okay. And are you familiar with a form called a Record of Evidence Submitted form?
I am.
Okay. And just, I'm going to show you one in a second, but can you just tell the jury in general, what is a Record of Evidence Submitted form?
It's technically called an evidence submission form. That's a form that's filled out or generated via the computer when evidence is brought into the laboratory. It will show the submission number as well as the item numbers that are submitted during that submission.
Hernandez, I'm showing you a document. Do you recognize that as it's an evidence submission form?
I do.
Okay, and is that in fact the evidence submission form that accompanied the evidence, some of the evidence you talked about on direct examination, including a towel?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm sorry?
If I can clarify.
Please.
This was a form that was printed up after the towel was examined, so there are additional items on here that weren't actually there when it was submitted.
Okay. Well, what would you, why don't you tell us what that form is?
So this is a form. In its origination, it would just have the evidence that's submitted to the lab. Once we examine the items and we make samples, if you then go to regenerate it, it will have the additional samples on there listed.
Okay. So this has a number of evidentiary items in addition to the towel listed on it.
It does.
So does this form that I've just shown you, does that have a name other than an evidence submission form?
It does not.
Okay. But is that a form that your laboratory generates in the ordinary course of business?
Yes, we can generate an evidence submission form at any point in time for each submission.
Okay. And does that appear to you to be an accurate copy of an evidence submission form that was generated in the course of this case?
Yes, generated after the initial submission.
Okay. Your Honor, with the exception of a particular redaction that I've discussed with counsel, I'd move its admission into evidence.
Just be heard quickly a second.
We'll come back to this after lunch, Ms. Hernandez. Let me move on to something else right now. Well, let me show you another one. Showing another document, do you recognize that as an evidence submission form that was generated by your laboratory in the course of the investigation in this case?
I do.
Okay. And does that appear to be an accurate copy of an evidence submission form that was generated by your laboratory?
It does.
Okay. I'd offer this as an exhibit, Your Honor.
No objection. Next exhibit.
270.
So I'm putting on the screen, Exhibit 270. Does this reflect the receipt by your laboratory of 3 items of evidence that were submitted?
Yes, it's a copy of it.
Okay. And am I correct that those 3 items are identified as a bottle, paper, and blue gum / Play-Doh?
Correct.
Okay. And they were submitted to your laboratory. Can you tell what date they were submitted to your laboratory?
On the 21st of June, 2013.
Okay. And when items are submitted to your laboratory, are there times when what you described as the investigators will make specific requests about the kind of testing they want done in those items?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, there's a specific section of this document where those requests can be set forth, right?
Correct.
Okay. There's a column, little line up here, says special requests, comments, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's where the investigators can make a special request.
Yes, they can.
Okay. And with respect to these particular pieces of evidence you told us about, can you read what were the special requests, if any, that were made of your laboratory with respect to the testing of these 3 items of evidence?
Prints and DNA.
Now,
We're going to take a
Yes, Your Honor.
recess at
That's
this
fine.
time. Mind you, discuss the case when yourselves or anything else.
Would all rise, the jury, please.